My name is Elyse Hoffenberg. I'm the clerk of the Township of Lyons. I'm thrilled to have you all here today. Here at the Township of Lyons, we're rethinking what local government can do. We work very hard to try to bring more resources to the community, and bringing out our congressmen, the Metropolitan Water and Reclamation District, and other community leaders is one way that we're working hard to try to help our local community members with issues that we all grapple with. Today, we are joined by Mayor Steve Landeck, Mayor of Bridgeview, Congressman Sean Casten, Metropolitan Water and Reclamation District Commissioner Cam Davis, and then we have the Metropolitan Water and Reclamation District Engineering Team. So we're honored today to come and talk to you about stormwater mitigation. I believe that the engineers are going to give you a presentation first, and then Mayor Landeck is going to ask a couple questions of our panel, and then we'll open it up to all of you so you can ask more specific questions about things that you're dealing with. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the Metropolitan Water and Reclamation District. And again, thank you so much for coming out today.
Good. Thank you, everybody. I'm Cam Davis with the Water Reclamation District, one of the 9 commissioners. Molly, why don't we go to the next one? Yes. And we've got some maps, we've got some background for you. And then what I want to do with you today is kind of go big picture, but then start to narrow down into the more local, granular work that we're doing in collaboration with the township, thanks to the good work of Clerk Hoffenberg, Mayor Landeck, many others, and of course Congress. And I know that Congressman Casten has been a warrior for getting funding, federal funding, to this area to help relieve the flooding that folks feel. What I wanted to do very quickly is I'll introduce myself in a second, a little bit more detail, but I also want to introduce Joe Canzalozzi and Brian O'Malley with the MWRD team. In the event that we get real granular with questions, Joe and Brian are at the point where they probably know just about every inch of the system in this area. And so they can also help answer questions as well. I also want to just mention I'm learning as I go too, so I'm hoping today is also about hearing your ideas in addition to my telling you and giving you some stories about some of the work of the district thanks to the funding that we get and that others get as well. I have, for 40 years now, been a public interest Clean Water Act attorney. I've been the only board's Water Act attorney for some years now. I've made my entire career of trying to help us with clean water because I know it's the basis of life, and also to make sure that I'm doing everything that I can to advocate for everybody in Cook County when it comes to flooding. Because flooding, as you all know better than just about anybody else, can have fiscal ramifications, public health ramifications, not to mention recreational and quality of life implications as well. I also grew up with the unenviable task of helping my father clean out our basement when it backed up, and sometimes it would back up twice a year. I remember having to throw out really smelly carpeting, and when you're 5, 6, 7 years old, I can tell you that that's not the job you want to do. So I have some really distinct memories of being in the situation that I think many of you and your neighbors have been in. And I think it's incumbent on us to keep working together to help mitigate some of those problems that you're all too familiar with. The other theme I'm going to give you is that there is no panacea. There's no silver bullet when it comes to addressing flooding. It is a real multi-dimensional problem that takes multi-dimensional solutions. A variety of solutions, everything from the big picture, which I'll get into, to the small picture, which I'll also give some examples of today. So I just wanted to set the stage for what comes next, and that is a little bit about the district. The district is one of the least known, most important agencies that we have in our entire region. Why is that? Because its primary focus is public health. We protect public health when it comes to water. Originally, MWRD started when water quality became an issue, and it became an issue because sewage, raw sewage, was dumped into Chicago area waterways that would flow out into Lake Michigan. That was our drinking water source, and you can pretty much guess what the results from that kind of a system or an approach would have been. So founded some time ago, right now we help 882 square miles of Cook County, second largest county by area in the US. So it's massive. And part of what makes this county distinct is that, as we all know, it's relatively flat. It's not like you can go mountain hiking anywhere close by if you live in Cook County. That means that water tends to stay put. It tends to flow less quickly off and away than it would if we had some real topography here. And that plays into some of the dynamics that you see in Lyons Township. 129 communities, that includes the city of Chicago. And the city of Chicago has its own stormwater rules and laws that MWRD collaborates with in terms of implementation, in terms of planning, things like that. We have 7 wastewater treatment plants around the county. One of them is very close by to here, called the Stickney plant, the largest wastewater treatment plant in the entire world, as some of you may know. We also have a bunch of reservoirs that I'll talk about in a few minutes. We treat about 1.4 billion gallons of water per day as the agency. That's a lot of water. And again, it has to do with how many people we have in the county, how the water moves, things like that. And then in 2004, we added a new mission to our agency's purpose, and that is to help manage stormwater. That authority was given by Springfield. Let's go to the next one. And what you see here is a map of Lyons Township. One of the things that we've seen, one of the things that we've learned, one of the things that we've tried to do is work on a micro level. But before I get to that, let me mention the program that we call TARP, the Tunnel and Reservoir Program. TARP is almost what the full term suggests it is. It's a network of tunnels that lead to reservoirs, and its primary purpose is wastewater. So, as we use wastewater around the county, and if we get big rains, those two streams, literally, of water and their contents can mix. That's called a combined sewer system. That's what is intended to go to TARP, into these deep tunnels that goes into these reservoirs. And the idea is that what we want to do is we want that water to go somewhere. We sure don't want it to back up into your basement, my basement, Congressman Casten's basement, anybody's basement. But what we want to do is send it somewhere for storage until we start to get sunny days again. And then once we have those sunny days, those 7 treatment plants can start to catch up and treat water that otherwise we couldn't get to while it was raining and it was storming. We have about 110 miles of tunnels that connect to one another through these reservoirs. And the reservoirs right now, we've got about 350 million gallons of storage with the Majewski Reservoir that's up north of us. We have 3.5 billion gallons of storage here in the McCook Phase 1 area. And then in Thornton, we have about 7.9 billion gallons worth of storage. So we have pretty good storage, and in fact, this is considered what we're trying to do. You can think of it almost as building an underground labyrinth of roads and highways You know, you think about what it takes to build highways and streets and things like that above ground. Imagine doing that underground. That's what we've been doing now for 60 years or so. So it takes a while. We also know that there is a phase 2 of McCook that we want to go online, and I can talk a little bit about that too if there are questions, that will add another 6.5 billion gallons of storage capacity for Cook County. That has been delayed, unfortunately, for reasons I can get into, but once that goes online in the next several years, that should also help a lot in terms of storage, alleviating basement backups and things like that. But it's not just the big TARP projects that help as we keep learning. It's also about how local projects can connect to TARP, how they can connect to their own storage facilities, like we have with some of the stormwater relief work that's going on in the Lyons Township area. And it gets even more granular than that. As with this map, one of the things that we keep learning is that as we've paved over our landscape, it's a little bit like taking saran wrap, a big, huge sheet of saran wrap, and covering your ground with it so that the water doesn't sink in, or it sinks in very slowly. So over time, one of the things that we want to do, and we're trying to do, and we're investing in doing, is we are investing in what we call green infrastructure projects, which is kind of how it should have been all along. Green infrastructure is the use of nature to absorb water and have it just naturally dispersed back into the world. Everybody got that? Because you're going to hear that term a little bit more today. And so this map represents here millions of dollars of investment by Lyons Township, by the local municipalities, by MWRD, and even others to build green infrastructure projects around your township. That'll again keep helping with alleviation of flooding in your neighborhoods. Some of those projects include taking up the impermeable pavement that I mentioned before and converting it to permeable pavement. What does that look like? That looks like the use of bricks instead of concrete, so that water can sink down between the seams of those bricks. That's happened in alleyways, such as in Summit, in LaGrange, in Lyons, and many of the other townships around here that you can see reflected in the map. Let's go to the next one. One of the other things that we're doing that's really important is we're doing floodplain buyouts. This is one of the approaches that I'm one of the biggest fans of. We know that building took place long ago in places where building probably wasn't advisable. And those are places that flood frequently. So over time, one of the things that we're doing is we are purchasing properties that flood frequently from willing buyers, most of the time, and converting those properties back to floodplain. Again, so that these areas can be used as sponges to soak up excess stormwater. It's one of the best, most reliable processes that we know about. We're also looking to our friends on the federal level, such as Congressman Casten, for federal funding. And a couple of those that I just wanted to bring to your attention very quickly. One of them is going through the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and applying to their hazard mitigation program. That helps in terms of once we see a hazard like an area that floods frequently, it helps in terms of support for work that can mitigate those kinds of hazards like flooding. Right now, in cooperation with some of our local partners, we have put in for a grant to FEMA using that program that would provide 10 acre-foot, a sense of 10 acre-foot storage for water under the high school, the Lyons Township High School athletic field. That's a lot of water that can be stored locally. It's really important. We think the chances are good that we're going to get that funding, but there might be others who can help even more push that forward. And there's a cost share involved, as there are a lot of times. 75% of the funding would be through FEMA, through that federal grant program. 25% would be a mix of local funding, and that is through MWRD, the Village of Lyons, the Township of Lyons, and also, of course, with the high school allowing us to use its property, there's an in-kind contribution as well from the high school, and that's important. A few more points. I'm an old law professor, so I can ramble on a whole lot, but you probably don't want me to do that. Maybe you do. I'll wrap it up in just a few points here, with a few points. Another federal funding proposition that we have out right now is through Housing and Urban Development, HUD. And it's kind of a package grant. In other words, you apply for several project ideas, and you may get a little bit of money back. You might get a lot of money back. We don't quite know at this point, but we have been working with Cook County to get those projects queued up for HUD funding. And if that does come through, and again, we're feeling very confident that they could, the kinds of projects that we would be looking at is funding things like green infrastructure in Summit. We have a draft plan online, anybody can access. Glad to get that link to you through Clerk Hoffenberg or however you see fit, so that you can get details. But the idea here is, as I've said, and I told you I was going to keep coming back to this theme, there's no one approach, and we have to go big and we have to go small. These are kind of, in my mind, the ultimate projects because they involve partnerships with federal agencies like HUD and FEMA, but they rely on the local expertise that we have here in Summit Township and with our engineers at MWRD to know exactly where we could get the best bang for those federal dollars. Let's go to the next one. And this is one, let's go back. This is one that I always really like to talk about because there are things that we can do in our daily lives. We're not at the complete mercy of Congress. We're not at the complete mercy of HUD or FEMA or MWRD or any one of your levels of government for that matter. There are things that you can do around your home or around your business. And these pictures capture some of those things. One of the things that you can do is get rain barrels. I have 3 of them on my house. My kids and I have named them, if you want to know how geeky we are. Betty, Freddie, and Eddie, I think they are. They each hold 55 gallons. So that's a storage capacity of what? That's the 165 gallons of storage that we have around our house. And we use that water to water gardens, to water our vegetables and things like that. That's something you can do. It's one of the best deals in town. Go onto the MWRD website. You can buy them for $45, $50 delivered and install them yourself. And then you also get the advantage of having 55 gallons of relatively clean water that you can use and not have to pay a bill for. A few other things, rain gardens. If you can, send your downspouts into your yard so that your yard is absorbing stormwater. What we don't want to do is send it out into the system where it's relatively expensive to treat and to handle. If we can keep that water local without flooding your basement, without flooding your home, that's one of the things that we can do. Another thing is planting trees. A mature elm tree can retain about 100 gallons of water and use that. So trees are like sponges, and we all love trees. They give us oxygen. So we at MWRD can also help communities by donating trees. And I've done this as a commissioner. I've requested trees for planting. It's a great Earth Day event for any of you who are starting to think spring already. But that's a smart, good way that, say, park districts can help in terms of absorbing water, is using trees. And then finally, just good old-fashioned education. We have a lot of education materials at MWRD that can help teach us what to do, including, for example, overflow action days, of which today is one. When we get a storm anywhere in Cook County, one of the things that we try to do in collaboration with Friends of the Chicago River is we try to alert people who've signed up for the list and ask them to hold off on doing their laundry, hold off on the showers, hold off on doing the dishes, things like that. Anything that we can all do to reduce water inputs into the system when we most need that storage capacity will go a long way, because we have 5.2 million people in this county. That's a lot of water savings when we need it most. That is literally at the control of our fingertips if we decide to turn on faucets in our own home, or hoses, or things like that. I am sure some of you have seen neighbors who've had sprinklers on when it's raining. Those are the kinds of things that add up and can help a lot in terms of conservation. So why don't I leave it at that? I think you've got a few things you want to chatter about, and glad to answer questions later. And then here's our contact info. Don Walker is my chief of staff. You're always welcome to reach me. We're here to help.
I don't think I need the mic. You can all hear me all right? So I'll be brief. Number one, Elyse, Mayor Landeck, thank you for doing this. Every time I come out here, I get put in the front of the stage because I won a couple more votes in an election than somebody else did. But these people are the experts who actually know what they're doing. So I'm learning more than I'm sharing. Would just make the quick observation that I want to thank Cam and the MWRD team who took me down in the Deepwater Tunnel a couple weeks ago. And just seeing the sheer scale, if you ever get the chance to go down, it's a nice reminder of what America is capable of. These enormous projects that have been going on for, I mean, you said 70 years in the tunnel. I think the project is over 100 years old and makes a difference. My big takeaway from being down there is, number one, we got to get that second phase of the McCook Reservoir done. Number two, we got pretty lucky this year in terms of weather. We did have a few hard rain events, but we had fewer than before, and so we didn't have quite the same pinch. And number three, that the biggest bottleneck in the system is not the stuff under you all's control, but is all the upstream pieces, all the things that Commissioner Davis is talking about. How do you get the water into the pipe? And we see that in our office, that we have the ability federally to steer money into programs that everybody has to compete for. So we can put money into broad categories of here's $2 billion for federal flood control, but then states will have to compete on that. We have the ability to steer it sometimes in ways where it's competitive, but we know that really the only person who can actually win this grant is in our district. So as an example, we've pretty consistently been able to steer money for the deployment of urban trees that will help with water uptake, that will help cool urban areas, that will specifically select for trees that are able to grow and will only be allocated to programs who have the horticultural knowledge to do that and to go through and manage and maintain those trees afterwards. The only person who checks all those boxes is the Morton Arboretum. so we've been able to specify that in a way. And to Commissioner Davis's point, if you really want to help out with the trees, they take volunteers all the time. And so we've had a bunch of friends and constituents who will go out in the summer, and it's not just for water, but it's if you look at a map of where trees are in Chicago, the broader Chicagoland area, it tracks very closely to where property values are. It also tracks very closely to where historically redlined neighborhoods are. And it tracks very closely to where the summer heat index is, because if you have a tree, it's cooler. And so there's good volunteer opportunities that they do where you go out and plant trees in places where it's most urgently needed and helps address some of these issues. The third way that we can steer money is specifically with earmarks, of course. And I think in the last couple of years, we could have filled every one of our all of our earmark allotment. We don't call them earmarks anymore; it's a dirty word. community-directed funding, I think we call it, but whatever. But we could have filled all of that with all of that upstream stuff, because there isn't a town in the Chicagoland area that doesn't have a storm sewer that they wish was 2, 3, 6 inches more diameter, so they could handle more flows. You know, money for another detention pond, money for these pavers. We have funded every one of those projects that you talked about somewhere, and a fraction of what the need is. We'll keep pushing for that. I would be lying to you. I don't know when they're going to unlock my office right now, which is funny, not funny. So I can't guarantee when we will get those next projects done, but I would say that, you know, just keep an eye with the townships, with your local towns, with your mayors, with the MWRD, where these projects are, because it's much easier for us to go through and get those through the process. When the engineering's been done, we can go through and get them taken care of. And you all have been fantastic partners. You've been fantastic partners to go and get it done. So let's know we can help. And happy when we get into questions, if anything more. But again, just thank you for doing this, and thank you for the education.
Well, we're probably interested in the TARP program, but the second phase, you have Mayor Cook here. Maybe he's holding it up. I tend to think he probably is holding the whole project up, causing us all the flood. But maybe you could explain on your side when you said that TARP 2 is canceled or delayed. Could you explain that?
Sure. So what Mayor Landeck is speaking about is a part of the McCook Reservoir. Again, I mentioned 3 reservoirs. One of those, the McCook Reservoir that's closest to here, is actually divided in half. Not quite half, but divided in 2. The first part, stage 1, is complete. That's holding 3.5 billion gallons of water. It's the second phase right now where we've seen a delay. It's not a cancellation, it's nothing like that. There's been a delay. And the delay is because the storage area is a quarry, limestone quarry, and that limestone has been selling slower than it has been in the past. Pretty simple to understand. And until that quarry is mined, that storage, that auxiliary storage, doesn't exist. Now, you know, I've asked internally, do we have any levers where we can kind of speed this up? And unfortunately, there really aren't. These are market forces at play. I mean, if you guys want to buy some big limestone boulders and store them in your yards, that might help a little bit, but I don't think it's going to help that much. But that's kind of what we're dealing with right now, is the slower than anticipated sale of limestone from that quarry. Even then, it doesn't mean that phase 2 or stage 2 is dead. It just simply means that it's taking longer than we thought, and it will come online sometime in the next several years. Does that help?
So was there was there an agreement to set a date for this quarry to be out of business, or when they reach a certain level?
So there was an anticipated date, Mayor Landeck, but that anticipated date was based on historical mining rates from the quarry. The consent decree, or the agreement, if you want to call it that, is essentially tied to the business's ability to move that rock, to sell it. And that agreement is based on that kind of as a fundamental. So at this point, I don't think this is a dynamic that is unusual to our area. I think this is happening around the country, but that is what is causing the adjustment to the time frame.
So if they had phase 2, would that solve the flooding problems? Would it take that water that goes into the McCook line to the last place it goes, and then it goes in the quarry?
Correct.
Right, that LaGrange, say LaGrange goes into McCook, right?
So and I'm a lawyer, so I tend to be pretty precise with my
Yeah,
words.
I know. I didn't say it solved all the problems. I'll say
Right.
it solved most of the problems.
I don't think we at MWRD can ever say that any one thing will solve a problem for good. And a big part of that is, as I think you heard before, we are dealing with something completely outside of all of our control, and that is Mother Nature and climate change. We are getting much more intense localized storms than we've ever gotten before. We call them microbursts. And when they happen, instead of getting, let's say, an inch across this table, let's say we get 3 inches on this 10% of the table. The system was never built to handle that kind of a new sense of distribution. We are finding right now, for example, that detention ponds that we built to store water that were built around 1960 for a 100-year storm would have to be built about 40% bigger today to handle that very same storm. That's what we're dealing with, and it's a function of the atmosphere. So that all said, it doesn't mean we're at the complete mercy of what comes from the sky. It means, and I've given you some of the tools here, that instead of 1960 or 70 or 80, during which time we might have thought, well, we'll just build another tunnel or we'll just build more reservoirs. We have come to understand that one of the best ways to address this new dynamic is to get hyper-local in our solutions. It's to do the things that we just talked about. Trees, green infrastructure and alleys, almost on a neighborhood by neighborhood approach.
I would also just, and correct me if I'm wrong, my engineering brain, if the pacing item was McCook, then you'd see McCook overflowing and then working back upstream, right? As opposed to if the pacing item is the size of the pipes getting in, you start to see pooling upstream, before McCook gets overflow. And I think, you guys correct me, I think it's more often than not the latter scenario, not the former where they're full and you're sort of sending the pressure signal upstream, right?
Yeah, like that usually a bottleneck could be the local sewers.
Yeah.
So there could be surcharging local sewers even before it gets started.
Yeah, which isn't to say we don't need the McCook expansion, just
Yeah, exactly.
that's sort of the sense that I got with the engineers is that
So
all
we
the
have-
natural solutions are great, but also having those bigger pipes.
Yep.
Absolutely. We have restrictors in the village of LaGrange. I don't know how the restrictors in the McCook ditch and TARP will all come into play. I know that we will have restrictors potentially removed at some point. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Sure. So the restrictors, let's first talk about what those are. Those are essentially gizmos that that reduce the flow from point A to point B. And as the district works hard to reduce flooding across the county in our highest priority areas, including this one thing that we can't do, Clerk Hoffenberg, is, and I'm sure you all appreciate this, we can't allow more water to come from one community to the disadvantage of another one. So in other words, what we don't want to do is we don't want to negatively impact, community X to the advantage of community Y. These restrictors don't stop the flow of water in LaGrange or in Lyons Township. It just slows it down so that there's a more equitable distribution of that water when we have high impact times. And yes, you're right, the restrictor is supposed to come out, and I believe that's supposed to come out when phase 2 is done. I'm getting nods, so I feel good about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, good questions.
All right, at this time, we'll take.
Can I just ask one more question? The mayor of
Absolutely.
McCook. So the LaGrange pipes go into the McCook ditch, correct? Does that overflow? So when they back up, is it because they're restrictors, or they don't have excess, or they don't have volume coming out into the ditch? You know?
The ditch overflows too, so.
Does it?
Downhill overflows too. Just can't handle the water.
Okay.
Now, we have a village trustee from Summit here, Aurora Rodriguez. I know Summit had some tremendous flooding over the summer. Does Summit have restrictors?
I'm not aware of restrictions.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the flooding. You guys had a 500-year storm, so there's a 48-inch pipe that runs under Ingredient, the Argo plant. So there's sort of a bottleneck there. The pipe's just too small for all the water. Then it connects into our interceptor, but there's no restrictor along there. So we actually have a project in the area. We're looking to televise that. It's slowed up a little bit right now because we don't know who owns the pipe. We've been looking into that. once that's figured out, yeah, we're very aware of that project. We have projects underway to help correct it.
Thank you.
Right. All right, at this time, we would like to take questions from all of you. So if anybody has a question, Mike.
On the tarp tunnel, that gets filled up, like I say, when it rains, all the rainwater per se goes into the tunnel itself. I was told that it holds that water till it stops raining and it can be processed. Okay, after it's processed, where does that water go, and how much of that water is processed at any given time?
Sure. So the water, once it's processed, and I'll have to defer on the rates of processing, but it goes back into the Chicago River system as if it would if we had a very modest storm, let's say, after treatment.
Okay, so in other words, like say the Thornton Reservoir and the part of the McCook here, that doesn't get overflowed or filled up a lot because you're processing it at this basically the same time to get rid of it. Am I correct in that assumption?
Processing shouldn't vary, too much. But I guess I'm a little bit confused by your question here.
Well, I want to know after it stops raining, how long does it take for MWRD to process that water and get it out of the tunnel?
Okay. I see.
And then after that, like you said, it dumps out into the waterways,
Right.
like the I&M Canal and so on and so forth.
Right. Well, the different reservoirs are different sizes, so it can depend on how long it takes to clear each one of them out. But generally, just to make things simple, a matter of days, and that could be 2 days. It could be a little longer.
Okay. So, am I correct in saying that basically after the rain stops, you're going to be processing that to get rid of it out of the tunnels?
That's the idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I could jump in as well.
good.
I've seen the Thornton reservoir, so the idea is that during rain, right, there'll be a lot of combined sewers. So we want to intercept that with the tunnels, and it goes to the reservoirs. So after a rain event, when the wastewater plants have more capacity, then we call it drawing down the sewers. And at Thornton, I know it's about 5 feet per day that we can draw down, but it gets pumped to the wet wastewater plant.
Yes. Okay. And then after that, it goes into the streams,
Yeah, when the stream goes into like
Okay.
shipping.
rivers, whatever.
St. Louis.
Huh?
St. Louis.
It goes to St. Louis.
Yeah.
And
They need the water.
And for those of you who really want to geek out on this, we actually have live cams, not to be mistaken with me being live here today, that can show you the level of the water that's in the reservoirs, and that's on our website.
Yes, sir.
I live in Indian Head Park, and I've lived in Chicago my whole life, but Indian Head Park the last years. And I agree, the microbursts, it's just different. I'm
Yeah.
not smart enough to describe why, it's just different. With Flag Creek, I've noticed over the years that when we get those heavy rains, it just seems to rise a lot quicker than it used to. Where does Flag Creek go, and will it eventually connect to Deep Tunnel? What's the thought on Flag Creek?
You stumped me. I don't know.
Because if you look at it, it's pretty
Yeah.
significant. It went all the way down and,
Yeah, it connects into the Plains River. It doesn't go to Tarver.
oh, it doesn't, okay.
We do have Catherine O'Connor here, who's the Director of Engineering as well. I don't know if you want to
Slade's
weigh
River
in.
is correct.
Right, Flood Creek.
Highway Commissioner knows, and so does Dr.
It's not part of MWRD at all.
Okay.
Creek is separate.
Like 9300 that way,
So it just dumps into Des Plaines River.
correct.
And where does the Des Plaines River go?
Illinois River.
St. Louis.
So there's
Bud
really,
Weiser,
so
right?
Flag Creek, Des Plaines River,
St. Louis.
there's no connection at all.
The sanitary ship canal meets the Des
Yes.
Plaines River
Okay.
at Lockport.
Okay, okay. So there's some, okay.
I actually believe there maybe is a Flag Creek or some, there's a different water reclamation or a different.
Well, there's one down there, 55 and 294, there's some sort of treatment plant there.
There's some other governmental entity that oversees, I think, Flag Creek, but I don't recall exactly what it is, but at one point we reviewed who was appointed to that
I think
board.
that's,
The
that's,
Lake Water Reclamation.
yeah, that's in Burr Ridge, right?
And where does
Over there.
so they
Yes.
treat the water and where does that go? It sounds like the Flag Creek is kind of the redheaded stepchild here.
Perhaps.
I will just say, and I don't think it's Flag Creek, but we helped get some money to Oak Brook to take out the dam over at Fullersburg Woods,
Yeah,
if you know where
right.
that is.
Yep.
And it was an enormously complicated project
Yeah.
because there's so many jurisdictions involved.
Yeah.
So once you get into the waterways, you know, you've got private land there, you've got county land, you've got municipal land. They had, I think it was one of you guys have a facility, I think up in Schaumburg, it was a treatment facility that was feeding into it. And one of my favorite nerd statistics is that if you take all the rivers in the world and divide their length as the crow flies by their distance, it works out almost exactly to pi. Because the circumference of a circle is 2 pi r, and rivers naturally want to bend and become curvy.
Yeah.
And as we channelize these rivers, the water flows through quicker and you lose some of the water treatment ability of that river. So a lot of what they were doing up there was saying, okay, the creek has a function
Yeah.
that needs sort of a wider acreage than just the current border, so it can meander a little bit. And then all of a sudden the creek ends up not only holding more water, but doing much better water treatment. Because the water spends, a drop of water spends a lot more time in the river or in the ocean than it spends in the Chicago municipal water system.
And I'm sorry,
I don't really know.
what's your name again?
Patrick. Murphy.
Patrick. So you raise a really good point, and it kind of prompts me to also mention that when we're going to get a big storm, there are steps that we take even before that storm begins. We actually manipulate at MWRD the levels of the river system. My point here with this, Patrick, is that we can use waterways like the Chicago Unsanitary Ship Canal as essentially an extension of the reservoirs and the tunnels to be able to hold water. So we will draw down the level of the system through our Lockport Lock so that water levels go down throughout the Chicago area waterway system, and that river then has more capacity to store too. The other dynamic we're getting, and I don't want to forget to mention this, and I have yet to come up with a fancy name for it, is we're also seeing conditions in winter change. And what I mean by that is we will have a streak of what you think of as winter in the Midwest, cold, snow on the ground's frozen, and then all of a sudden we might get 60-degree temperatures and a rain. What happens then? The rain has nowhere to go. The ground's frozen. So that rain just washes completely off, straight off into the system, goes into tarp. And we've seen this increasingly now over the past several winters. Hasn't happened every winter, but we've now seen it in the past 10 years several times where we hadn't necessarily seen that once in 100 years. Now, is that the kind of dynamic that's causing your basements or your neighbor's basements to back up? Not necessarily, but it is when these things happen, there's enough rain and there's enough frozen ground, we're seeing tarp get pretty darn close to capacity. And that really has never happened before. Again, it's a function of what's going on around us.
Getting back to Flag Creek, how often does MWRD go out there and check it out as far as getting backed up from, there used to be a bunch of beavers there, I don't know if
Yeah.
they're still there.
Yeah, they're still there.
Okay, and they used to build the dams and would back up. And you guys would sometimes go out there, either knock the dams down or try to catch the beaver, I don't know.
We do have a tree clearing program to help, remove debris that otherwise can jam up a waterway. But sometimes we don't know about that until we get a call from, let's say, local government. So that's where that kind of intermunicipal government collaboration really helps.
Well, you've gotten better with Flag Creek the last few years. They get after it pretty good. It's cleared a lot better than it used to be.
Yeah, I mean,
Somebody's doing something.
this is a good example where if I get an email with pictures from somebody saying, look, this beaver has gone to town on this creek and it's causing water levels to rise, I'm able to get with our executive director or our Department of Engineering and, we can start to take a look at that. But knowing that, I can promise you with the 882 square miles, I'm not driving around looking for beavers in our, every waterway. So if you guys can let us know, then that helps us do our job better so that we can help you.
Do we have any other questions?
I have a
Oh,
question.
okay.
In Bridgeview, we have a two system. We have the storm sewers and
Combined,
sanitary. In Summit, the trustee, they're one. They're right. They're a unified system. Does the water in a separate system, in our storm system, is that discharged directly into the river?
Yeah.
Plains Valley River, and it'll never go into your system for treatment,
Yeah, that's correct.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, only a unified system or our sanitary system, sewer will go through your system. Right, so in Summit, they're putting their stormwater and their sanitary all in one, has to go to the target. Correct? Into your program, into your
Well,
system.
go to our interceptor and then
In
the interceptor surcharges and then, yeah, we treat all that water.
Okay.
LaGrange is the same. We have mixed sewers as well.
I do want to mention one more thing. I had a map up here earlier today of some of the very local green infrastructure projects that are going on. I didn't bring handouts for everybody because I never like to waste paper if I can avoid it. But I do have the map here. I do have the list of projects here, the amount that MWRD contributed to those, the kind of storage capacity that they have. And I'll leave this with Clerk Hoffenberg so that anybody can take a look at it or request a copy of it.
I have a question. I'm Elizabeth Tolomeo. I'm a resident in LaGrange Highlands, and I'm also on the Highlands Association Board. For years, we field complaints from residents regarding flooding. I think everybody knows it's a pretty big problem in the Highlands. And you guys are talking about some really big projects, and then you mentioned the hyper-local things that can be done. And I know Terry's been really great about addressing the culverts and creating some detention and retention areas. But one of the topics that we have tried to address for many years is new construction and how it impacts the homes in the area. We don't have a municipal code, so our building code falls under Cook County. And some of these new homes are being built with grades being raised so high, and then the inevitable obvious happens. The runoff from that property now floods the people behind them or next to them, et cetera. And with the area really coming of age, there's a lot of older homes that are being sold and redeveloped. And we really didn't get very far with Cook County in terms of trying to get them to be more sensitive about that within the building code in Cook County. Do you have any leverage there? Do you work with Cook County at all in terms of being gentler to the surrounding lands and properties, et cetera, or being more green in the building?
Yeah, well, you're right that building codes can help a lot. We have, where I live, we just had a new grocery store put in, and one of the conditions of that grocery store getting its permit was that the parking lot had to be redone and be basically a green infrastructure parking lot. Those are the kinds of things that local municipalities, can do. As far as individual homes, that is at a scale that's so small for us that MWRD really doesn't have any authority to help with that. Where we help under our watershed management ordinance is where we might have a relatively big, let's say, mall. Not that anybody's building malls anymore, but you get the idea in terms of size. Individual homes, that's something that really has to go to the municipality.
But we don't have a municipality.
It would be Cook County, and I know it's very hard to,
Yes.
as the clerk,
Yes.
I
mean,
encountered
we
problems.
spent
Yes.
Yeah.
hours and hours of labor putting together proposed construction codes for that. And we just kept running, into headwinds with that. And it just seems like there's no political will to address that. You mentioned that, our projects are big projects or big mall, et cetera, but, this is our community. And
Yeah.
if there's 10 homes that are newly built that are now suddenly 4 feet higher
Right.
than they were prior,
Right.
that adds up. That
Well,
would
and
be
the
equivalent
footprint-
of the impact of one big thing.
The footprint of that development means there's more water, and that's going to those neighboring properties, and
Right.
that's not
It's
fair.
super obvious, but for whatever reason, we just haven't been able to get any traction on addressing that. And I don't think it really hurts anybody to have code that is gentler to the surrounding community. You get the engineers there,
I mean, we regulate subdivisions, but like Cam said, every individual home would be like 3 million, we just don't have the manpower, we do.
Right.
We do any development over half an acre, commercial, and then subdivisions, we can't do it either, single family homes.
It's definitely a matter before the Cook County Board, and unfortunately, we've had issues with all kinds of things with Cook County. They're very hard to communicate with, they're very unresponsive, so it's definitely a challenge. We are, in my office, are working on it every day. We know that you guys struggle with that, so you are heard. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay.
A year or so ago, you guys were buying a house, tearing it down on 62nd Street, and you putting in a retention pond with a few pumps, supposed to help the management of the water. I found 2 gentlemen on my property in the middle of winter, and they were running survey stakes, and I just went up and said, hey, what's going on? And they say, well, we're going to be doing this, we're going to be running here, I said, well, you're going to be diverting more water over my house. They go, well, it could be. I said, well, let me give you an example. You need to widen this ditch, go right ahead. You want to make it deeper, go right ahead. It'll help the neighbors. I said, I only got one request. I would like for someone to line it with rock.
Courtney.
And what happens? You guys took care of it. It took some of the water pressure off. The only problem is the folks across the street where there's a converter pipe going east are 2 feet lower and they're on slabs, which means the water comes to their house, it's going into their piping system. I know, but the thing about it is, had you guys talked to the homeowners, the property, the ditch and all that, you might get a large amount of cooperation, as they got with me, and they actually made it better for me, made it better for some of my neighbors. So if you guys are gonna do projects like that, I just suggest that, if you got a ditch in front of someone's house, talk to them. They may be willing to do a lot of things to keep the water out of their house. But this ditch system here in the Highlands, I think someone told me it was put in 1912.
Well, thank you for that feedback. It makes a lot of sense.
All right, it is 4 o'clock, so I want to thank everybody for being here today. So nice to see you all. Thank you all so much, Mayor Landeck, Congressman Casten, Commissioner Davis, and the MWRD team. We are so grateful for the work that you do for our community. We're so grateful you came out to talk to us about the things that we are dealing with out here. We look forward to future conversations with you and just hope that everybody has a safe and healthy and good rest of your weekend. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.